Hello and welcome into our Corn-Fed Sports in the Morning here for our Wednesday morning video show. It's our second video of the show of the week, so that's the first time we can say that for a Wednesday morning. It's our first full week of production, so this is actually going to be the first time we're putting it on our Ustream channel and kind of streaming it live the way that we're going to hope we can do things in the future. Hopefully we can start bringing you some full-on live shows where you guys can interact and some of those different things. So this will be our first test of the Ustream, so feel free to let us know, tweet at us, send us the comments, just let us know what you guys think of the experience. But we won't waste any time. We got a full show. So we're going to start with the Corn-Fed 5. And we're talking Nebraska football in the first topic. So, you look at it with the way Amir's coming off, being named the Big Ten co-offensive player of the week. And then you got Tommy making, should Tommy Armstrong get that starting nod? Redshirt freshman, first road start of the career. So you kind of got two guys. Amir, he's done a lot of things on the road in the past, even as kind of a backup, made some big waves on the road in games where Rex gets hurt and something. So he's battle tested on the road. And then you got Tommy, who's looked good, looked composed, and Coach Beck talked about that a lot of practice yesterday. So, what are your expectations for the backfield heading into the Purdue game?
I mean, nothing different than what we've been seeing the whole year. Just like the team is expecting greatness. I mean, I'm expecting them against I think a better Purdue defense than Illinois, but still, a kind of lower level team in the Big Ten. I'm not expecting much different. Amir, I mean, he's kind of taken control of taking control of the ball. He's not fumbling as much, which is always good to see. And Tommy Armstrong, he's got that maturity of an upperclassman. He's not making a whole lot of mistakes, not turning the ball over a lot, and that's what you want to see out of Tommy Armstrong. And he's got that presence and that command in the huddle that obviously a senior-laden team and a junior-laden team wants to see. And when you see Purdue selling tickets on StubHub for just over $4, that doesn't scream, I'm terrified going into the stadium. So I think that's going to be a big difference.
And I agree with you there. I think that short of the tunnel walk and can you feel it and some of those things from the home field, that it's going to feel a lot like Memorial Stadium with the amount of red, with people cheering at different things, the people kind of doing some of the celebrations, and then the band always travels well. And the other big thing that you see from Tommy in the way that he's able to switch fields instead of getting caught on the end of the line, they always able to pump fakes and fake on the pitch option and then cut up field for 10, 15 yards and do some of those things that you kind of think of a more crafty guy. So, I think I agree with you there. You don't really see those jitters. And, Amir getting back to that national prominence, that people on a national stage took notice of what he did. Obviously, anytime you set a career high for rushing yards and do what he did on that option play, you're going to turn some heads. So I think you're going to see a lot of the same that you've seen, but I think this week is going to be another huge game for Amir. So I don't think Tommy's going to quite get unleashed if he's the one who gets that start. But we'll turn things around and look at the defensive side of the ball, and against the quarterback of that talent and how Nebraska was able to hold up. I mean, what did you see from the defense this past week, and what do you think that you're going to see from them against a young quarterback this next week? I mean, that's going to be the big test, is how they move from what they did against Nathan Shieldhouse to a young quarterback getting his feet wet in the Big Ten. I mean, what is the next step for this defense in making the switch from those two different types of quarterbacks in the first 2 weeks of conference?
Yeah, well, Nebraska is, like you said, they're going to be facing two completely opposite quarterbacks. It's a senior in Nathan Shieldhouse and now a true freshman in the Purdue starting quarterback. And, I mean, I think it favors Nebraska's defense very well. I think they match up a lot better, I guess, if you want to call it that, against Purdue than Illinois, if you want to say that. But last year they played Minnesota, starting a true freshman quarterback, Philip Nelson. Granted, that was at home, but they did rattle him a little bit. They had 2 or 3 interceptions in that game. And so even on the road, this Purdue offense has struggled. 7 points against Cincinnati, 20 points against Indiana State. So I think that this defensive matchup favors Nebraska.
And the way I look at it, and the way that I just kind of see how it'll progress here for Nebraska, is that when their defense is matching up against guys where they can get in their head and kind of get them moving around and get them thinking way too much, is when Nebraska is a lot better off. And people talk about how coaches are making adjustments against Nebraska, and Nebraska can't answer. And, the UCLA game and Hundley making some of his adjustments there. The ability to outcoach a defense, the ability to make adjustments that are going to put a defense in harm's way depends on the ability of that quarterback to be comfortable, to have his feet wet, and to have the command of everybody around him. And I know he stayed at home around bye week, as the ESPN story said, and arranged drills for his teammates, and he's been, this has been his dream for his entire life. But walking the walk in and laying it out in front of you is a completely different thing. And so the gauntlet's been laid out for him to be able to do those things, to think on the fly. But Nebraska, when they can get in quarterbacks' heads and the quarterback doesn't have an answer, is when they really put teams behind the eight ball and when they can really put some pressure on some teams. And so you just don't really see a lot of things that say this guy's going to be, the combination of a new coach and a new quarterback who just had his red shirt burned, who really wasn't anticipating being the guy this year. I just don't see that as an environment that's really going to take advantage of some of the holes that Nebraska's had in defense this year. So I think it's going to be another game where they just kind of take some steps.
Yep, and Jared Afalava talked yesterday, got his first shot at the media. He talked yesterday about Purdue's going to be playing a lot of the formation that has Nebraska in the base defense, the 4-3 look, and so that means the three linebackers, more Jared Afalava, more Zaire Anderson. And so if anybody remembers last year, that's where Nebraska with the pro-style offense kind of, I guess we're better against the pro-style offense rather than the spread offenses, so we'll see that too.
And having a full complement of linebackers is going to be a big thing. But we'll move on to volleyball here in our number 3 of the Corn-Fed.
Yep, after a great weekend for team-wise for Nebraska volleyball and also individually, Kelsey Robinson was named National Player of the Week. She was also named Co-Big Ten Player of the Week. A little bit of attention you might want to add to that?
Yeah, and that's the reason we're talking about it. And obviously, to win the National Player of the Week, her numbers speak for herself and what she did. I mean, you look at some of them, and I'm just going back and looking through pictures and looking through some of the different things, and it looks like she's throwing hook shots and doing some crazy things with her hands, but it's just taking her shots wisely, hitting above 400 and putting up 50 kills in a weekend. I mean, I can't even fathom that, 50 kills in a weekend. I mean, especially with the last couple of years, and Coach Cook always talks about when you have somebody that can be set to just one person, when somebody's going to dominate, it really makes your team easy to defend and predictable. You didn't see that at all from Nebraska. They kind of have that volume hitter without doing any of the traditional things and just constantly setting it to the same pin. So for her to put up that kind of volume with that kind of hitting efficiency, I mean, it just speaks volumes as to her ability to really capitalize on every opportunity she has. But, the thing that you love to see is that, when she gets a block on an opponent, she's the first to let them know that she got that block. And she's the first. I mean, you underestimate how much back and forth there is at the net, but you can see people coming at her early and trying to get her in her face early, and rather than make a big scene out of it, rather than snap back when she does something to shut them down, she just celebrates and lets them know what she got accomplished. And you can see that competitiveness on every single point. And so you can see it come through, and I think that's what, that competitiveness is what leads her to even be capable of having a big enough weekend to be the ABC National Player of the Week. So that's a huge award in itself, but I'll get in here at the end of my little soapbox right here, is that how you can be the National Player of the Week and split your Conference Player of the Week award is just kind of beyond me, especially when you compare the numbers. And I mean, not taking away from Michigan State's hitter, who was the co-Big Ten Player of the Week, but putting up 37 kills and 11 digs and wins against Northwestern and Illinois, against putting up 50 kills and putting up 29 digs against two ranked teams, especially Minnesota and Wisconsin, two unbeaten teams, and getting them their first losses in conference play. I mean, I don't really see the comparison. So maybe they just felt bad, and we'll get to it in the next, that Nebraska had 2 of the other 3 conference awards. But it's just interesting you can be the National Player of the Week and still split your Conference Player of the Week awards.
Yeah.
So, and that's also the first time since 2008 they've had those 3 award winners in those places. And I mean, you probably don't remember this as you weren't a big Nebraska volleyball fans time, but that's the year they went to the Final Four the last time. So that's a big sign for them. But we'll get to more of that in our fourth topic here.
And moving on to another volleyball topic number 4, we've got Freshman Player of the Week Amber Rolfson and Megan Haggerty, the Defensive Player of the Week, and another big weekend coming up this weekend for Nebraska volleyball. 17th ranked Michigan, 7th ranked Michigan State. 2 more good teams in the gauntlet that is the Big Ten. How do you see NU stacking up this weekend?
This weekend is going to be a test of physicality, of being able to match up with people who you're not going to be able to just hit past, who you're not just going to be able to outblock because you're there and because you're catching up with your assignments. I mean, these 2 teams are really going to test them physically. I mean, Megan Haggerty had a great, it wasn't just her defensive performance, it was the fact that she was able to have a season high with her number of kills against Wisconsin, hit at an efficient rate, and then get a bunch of block assists, get some solo stuffs, get some of those things that really gets the team fired up. And so Amber Rolfson also had a big weekend blocking, and though blocking is good against competition where you have the edge, where you're able to shut down the line and be more physically imposing. But this weekend, that's not going to be enough. These teams are really going to test their skill, really going to test their ability with their hands to keep the balls deflected in, to not make blocking errors, to not make service errors in big times. I mean, Nebraska was the beneficiary of that with the home crowd, with being able to get timely service errors from other teams. But they're really going to have to hone in and take advantage of all their opportunities, not be high error, passed well. I mean, that's the story every weekend. But you're not just going to get blocks against Michigan State. You're not just going to take care of Michigan's front line by being in the right positions. They're athletic, they're skilled, and Michigan making the run to the Final Four last year. Michigan State already beaten Penn State this year. There's some talent in those two teams. So Nebraska's got a lot of work ahead of them, but they've shown so far this year they're up to the task. Now they just got to keep clipping along at the same rate.
On to our last of the Corn-Fed 5. We're going to switch to soccer. They stayed in the top 25, stayed in the rankings after losing to Michigan. They dropped 1 to 24, so they've got only one game this weekend against Purdue. It's a game that they should win, but it is a road game, a tough conference. So what do you see from them this weekend?
I think the big thing for this weekend is if this game comes at a perfect time. I mean, obviously there's disappointment in giving up 2 quick goals to Michigan in that second half and having a big hill to claw back. They got the 1 goal back, but just couldn't get the 2 scores in the final 20 minutes that, when they really started to turn the game on its head a little bit. So there's a lot that they know they left on the table. They know they could have gotten that win. They know they could still be on their win streak and still pushing forward. But they're still in the rankings, and they're still moving up in the minds of the coaches and the perceptions of the other teams in the Big Ten as one of the top teams in the conference. So this weekend's going to be perfect for them because last weekend they rest some players against Iowa to gear up for Michigan. Now they've only got one game this weekend on Friday against Purdue. Can get a little bit more rest. Don't have to do a quick turnaround and play 2 games over the weekend. While at the same time next week they're going on a road trip to Wisconsin, to Minnesota. So some quality teams. It's going to be cold. I mean, we're both from Minnesota and the South Dakota area, so we're used to what that's like. Get the middle of October, you feel that turn a little bit, and so it's going to be a big chance for them to get some rest and just get the one game. And then they're playing against the Purdue team who lost 4-1 at Kansas. And Kansas didn't play Nebraska this year, but Kansas lost a pair of games to San Diego and San Francisco in Lawrence, and Nebraska beat those 2 teams in Lawrence. So you look a little bit against common opponents. It seems like it's pretty tilted in Nebraska's favor. But obviously, when on the road, you got to get possession. You got to be able to get control of the game. So if they can do that, if they can settle in and impose their system on Purdue, they should be able to take care of this weekend and load up for what's going to be a busy week next week. All right, well, that wraps up our Corn-Fed 5. We're going to come back with our pass, no pass segment here in the second part of our show, and we'll wrap things up with our 3 and out. So come back more for Corn-Fed Sports in the morning. All right, welcome back for our second segment here for Corn-Fed Sports in the morning. It's going to be our own kind of unique twist on the report card segment. I mean, everybody can give grades. Everybody can assign grades. But, we're college students. We're at a different level. So we're going to call ours pass, no pass. So we're not going to go to all the tedious natures of giving A's and B's and worrying about details. If you can get the job done, you can get the job done. So we're going to have our pass, no pass segment. It's going to be kind of a staple of our Wednesday show. So we'll start off our pass, no pass segment. I'm talking a little bit about the Nebraska football team in the first couple. So why don't you set us up here for our number 1?
So the first one's going to be Nebraska versus mobile quarterbacks, and against Illinois, I thought they did good. I mean, Josh Ferguson and Donovan Young set up the run game a lot for Illinois, so Shieldhouse didn't have to run it a lot, and when he did, Afalava, Randy Gregory were chasing him around on the outside.
Yeah, and I mean we're making this out to be kind of not just mobile quarterbacks, but the guys in the backfield and the yards up the middle and just kind of in the box and tackling in open spaces. And I think obviously you don't want the penalty that came with what they called a late hit. And he had another one that was close, but it was just a good physical hit coming out of bounds. So some of those things I think are positives for seeing not just hitting backs but quarterbacks and having some of those guys who are not just shifty guys but power runners inside and being able to shut them both down kind of in the same vein. So I give them a pass as well and just not just a guy who's mobile in terms of running, but Shieldhouse didn't really get any open lanes, didn't really throw it down the field, and didn't really find more space to make plays down the field. So I think overall it was just a good day. But we'll move on. We got another one here for our pass, no pass segment.
Yep, number 2, the offensive line, whether or not they've been living up to the hype, and I'm going to give them a pass. Only 2 sacks given up on the year. They're limiting turnovers, limiting penalties, and limiting sacks, which is what their Achilles' heel was last year. It's a very veteran line, and so I'm going to give them a pass.
And I'm going to give them a pass just based on this last weekend. I mean, it would have been a little more up in the air for me earlier in the year, and I think they would be the first guys to say that they didn't really impose on teams they would. And even though they mentioned they left more points on the board this last weekend, I don't think they left more points on it with the offensive line. The offensive line opened alleys. You see on that Amir Abdullah run, their offensive linemen ushering him into the end zone even that far down the field. So Amir mentioned at the press conference on Monday they did a great job of blocking down the field and making some of those things happen. So I think when they've got the conference play, it got a little bit colder. They felt that little bit of chill, and I think that really jump-started the offensive line. So I'm going to give them a pass for this last weekend. So we'll move on now to one that I'm excited to talk about here for number 3, that everybody talked about it early in the year, and we didn't want to make a judgment early in the year, but the Devaney Center and how it would hold up in the Big Ten environment and giving Nebraska that same home court edge to the Coliseum. So what do you think about the Devaney Center's pass or no pass from its first Big Ten weekend?
I'm definitely going to give them a pass, just with how loud it gets in there with 8,000 people in there. It's going to be hard to find not only a Big Ten school, but just a school in the whole country that can rival what the Devaney gives atmosphere-wise, energy-wise, and all of those aspects for volleyball.
And the thing that I was just blown away with, and the Coliseum has done a lot of amazing things with as far as runs and just what they've inspired Nebraska to do. But not since my super fan days of high school volleyball, and just when seeing that kind of setting, if I seen a gym just get in people's heads and just force net serves that weren't just net served, but they looked like they'd never served before in their lives. And there's just some things that happened, especially from Wisconsin, in some of the early sets that you just haven't seen on this level, and you don't really see the home court advantage really get. People are a little bit more composed than that, and they just were not ready for it. And Devaney took it to a new level this weekend and got louder than I've heard it all year. And so they definitely passed. Coach Cook thought it was a resounding pass. I think everybody involved thought it was a resounding pass, as well as people watching on BTN for this weekend. I mean, they got to see it up close and personal and what that place can do. So I think it was a resounding pass. So we'll jump back into football, but a little more fun, lighthearted football here for our final of the pass, no pass segment.
Yeah, final one. It's going to be Memorial Stadium music, and I'll take this one first. I'm going to say no pass, just because it's funny. There's songs that you'd think wouldn't be on there, but they're trying to pump the guys up, but they just don't seem like pump-up songs, so that's why I'm going to give them the no.
And I'm just going to give it the no pass this week as well, because I didn't think they utilized their selection as well as they could. I mean, maybe I'm just too much of a Kanye West fan, and I actually was one of the few that enjoyed Yeezus and the song Black Skin Head, and I loved hearing it. It's perfect. It's got the drum beat. Everybody can get kind of fired up to it. The whoa, 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 whoa is used from Zombie Nation at the right times for kickoffs and that kind of stuff. But the one thing I was happy is they didn't go as much with the synthy, like, electronic Seven Nation Army darkness sounding. I mean, I think Jack White dies a little on the inside every time a college football stadium takes on its own take and remixes his Seven Nation Army song. So I was happy to not hear that. But like I thought it was with you, it sounded a little bit too much like poppy, cheery music. And obviously that's one of the least of the concerns of the home crowd advantage and then the home field advantage. But I think the wide consensus is they could have done a better job of mixing in the music that we've known to love at Memorial Stadium. So that wraps up our first attempt at our pass, no pass segment. Instead of taking a break and coming back for our final, we'll just go right into our 3 and Out segment. 3 and Out's how we're going to be ending our video and radio shows from here on out. So we'll just kind of find 3 off-the-ball topics, or just topics from the wide world of Nebraska and Big Ten sports. So I'll start us off with the number 1 3 and Out, and it's something I'm gonna recap that I feel we were partly to blame with, as we tweeted about it from Corn-Fed Sports, is Amir had a quick solution for why Kenny had his amazing catch. And rather than skill or ability or anything, he credit to Kenny's orangutan arms. And so Kenny was not happy and said that he'd have to settle for Quincy Enunwa being his best friend instead. And Quincy was not happy that Kenny wanted Quincy that Kenny had to settle for Quincy being his best friend. So we started I think we might have had a hand in playing a little bit of a fun little interaction with them between Twitter. So we didn't mean to say that we didn't want to pass judgment on Kenny's arm, and we think Kenny's doing just fine. We don't want to compare him to a primate or a monkey or any of those different things. And so we think Kenny's just fine with his fro personality. But it was just interesting to see that. And we got another kind of interaction here in the Nebraska football world here for number 2.
Yep, I'm going to stick with football. And yesterday, Jared Aflava got his first chance to talk with the media. And he was doing fine at first. There were only 4 or 5 reporters, but once the horde of cameras came over, he kind of got uneasy. He had that that shiftiness, but he did do good. He did do good. He did do good. I'll give him credit. It can only go up from here for him.
So yeah, I kind of even get nervous when that many lights and all that stuff comes, and it's kind of an intimidating thing. So I'm glad to hear that he survived it as well. And then the third one, it's a little bit more of a unique situation that the Brent Urena from Big Ten or BTN.com tweeted yesterday about how Iowa sent an email about one of their football players who was involved in an incident, and he was cited for killing a duck outside of his residence with a bow and arrow. Now that might sound absurd, but as a Nebraska football, covering Nebraska football, I would not be surprised at all to hear this coming from one of the Huskers. And so it's coming from Iowa, kind of the same, hunting and just kind of the same outdoorsy feel. So, it's one of the few things they would see they have in common right now is those same kind of makeup of guys. But, if I were to hear that Kenny Bell or Jeremiah Searles are one of those guys who...
Jake Cotton,
yes, and those guys who tweet about hunting or who are just, the guys from around this area who like their, the pheasant season, some of those different things around here. I wouldn't at all be surprised to know that they were resourceful and they were getting their Bear Grylls on even outside of their residence here in Lincoln. So pressure's on you guys now. Let's see what critters can you hunt and successfully hunt in the Lincoln area.
There's a lot of squirrels around campus.
There are a lot of squirrels around campus, but you might want to watch out for their Twitter account getting mad at you from them. So we'll see if Nebraska football players ever get caught hunting people and hunting animals and not with their cars. And so that wraps up our 3 and Out segment here. So thanks for joining us on this Wednesday Corn-Fed Sports in the Morning. For Corn-Fed Sports, I'm Pat Radigan.
I'm Matt Durham.
Thanks for joining us.